myself yet. Anyway, thank you. It's so good to see everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in tonight and head with me to the Bornean rainforest, part of Borneo called Sabah, which I'll explain in a minute. It's a little bit of a complicated geography, but we'll get there. I did want to just point out, and a lot of you know this, that in 2020, Sunrise Birding marked 15 years of providing birding tours and wildlife safaris, and that really is a milestone for us. It's been an interesting year, of course. We went on pause in mid-March, which put me here in Connecticut, in Branford, for the longest time I've been here in 15 years. So I've been making good use of that and doing a lot of birding locally. And actually today, there is still a pied-billed grebe at Branford Supply Ponds. And let's see. And there was also a beautiful male northern pintail there. The great horned owls are back behind my house here at Lake Saltonstall. They've been courting and setting up territory, so that's been fun. This picture was taken a couple of weeks ago. And if you have made it out to Hammonasset to see the American bitterns, they've put on quite a show at Hammonasset. 2 days, there was a pair, one in the Nature Center marsh and one in the off the causeway out to Willard's Island, and they were really showy. It's a bird that can be hard to see, so I got a chance to see those. And then just yesterday, I took this picture of some common eiders off of the Pebble Beach Nature Trail. And they are in numbers in the sound now, which is interesting. They've sort of spread into the sound, and they were eating the mussels on those rocks there. So that was pretty cool. So, and also we've had a snowy owl, or a couple of snowy owls in Connecticut, and this was one that actually Frank Matlick told me about, a snowy owl at Stratford Airport. And as many of you know, or some of you know, my partner in crime, Steve Bird, has been in England since this all started. So we've been separated for going on 9 months now. That's been very difficult, but we do bird together, because when I saw this snowy owl, I called Steve on FaceTime. There he is, and I put the snowy owl in the scope so he could bird together with me. So we've been adapting, like many of you have, to all of this craziness of the pandemic. So hopefully we're seeing the end of the tunnel. In recent months, we've been working on tours, and we're ready to get started as soon as possible. We're going to have, of course, local nature and birding opportunities, a lot of backyard birding perhaps in early 2021, and then domestic tours and international tours. So we're still here, going to go on 16 years and move forward when this craziness is all finished. So let's go to Sabah. Let's go to Borneo tonight. So I like to use maps to get us oriented. And so I wanted to show you the island of Borneo, which is down here in the picture, which is the third largest island in the world after Greenland and New Guinea. And it's about the size of Texas. And it encompasses actually 3 countries. There's Indonesia down here in the yellow. There's the little country of Brunei up here. And then there's the country of Malaysia, of which Sabah is a part. And Malaysia is actually broken into 2 sections. There's Bornean Malaysia here and Peninsular Malaysia over here under Thailand. So it's a unique country in that it is broken into 2 parts, but it is indeed all one country. Here's a close-up map of Sabah, the Malaysian state of Sabah, which is about the same size as our state of Maine, to give you an idea. And it's the top part of Borneo. There are people who go to Borneo and go to Sarawak, so you might hear people talking about Sarawak, but we are actually up in the northern part of Borneo Island tonight. And just to give you a sense of where this is in the world, here we are in southern New England, and Borneo Island is down here a little over 9,000 miles from here. in Southeast Asia. So now we know where we are. So when you arrive in Sabah, you fly to Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital of Malaysia, and then a quick flight over to Kota Kinabalu, which is the big city on Sabah. It's the biggest city. And if you feel like you're far away from home, in the airport is indeed a Dunkin' Donuts, and you can get your coffee and donut just like you can in Brantford. So you're not too far away from home. You can get some of the creature comforts anyway. But what's lovely about Kota Kinabalu is it's a modern city, and it's on the coast, as you can see, but it also has this green area, big park on the edge of the city. And so one of the first things we did when we arrived, after resting a little bit from the long flight, we went out into the park to see what we could find and some of the local spots around the city. So one of the first birds we saw was the Oriental pied hornbill. This is right in one of the local city parks. This is a big bird, about 30 inches, but it's the smallest of the hornbills, but it is indeed the most common. So we had several sightings of this throughout our trip. What I liked about this picture, even though you can see I had to take it up through some branches, is this one shows the eyelashes of the Oriental pied hornbill. Those are actually just feather plumes around the eyes, but it looks really kind of fancy. And I'll talk more about hornbill biology as we get further into the talk. Near some wet areas right behind an apartment building, we found a colony of Nankeen night herons. And Nankeen night herons are relatives. They're in the same genus actually as our black-crowned night heron, about the same size. And you can even see a resemblance, but it has a lot of rufous coloration on it, on the breast and also on the back. And it's also called Rufus night heron. But these were roosting in the trees during the day, so we got really nice views of these as well. And there were some pigeons to look for in the city park. The green imperial pigeon, which is a good sized pigeon, about the size of our rock pigeon, with those green metallic wings, which is where it gets its name, and a big, actually dark red eye. And in the wet areas, we found some wandering whistling ducks. There are something like 8 species of whistling duck in the world, and wandering is one of them. And so we added that to our life list. So the next morning, we drove up into the Crocker mountain range right outside the city, up a paved road that went all the way up to the top. And as we drove up, you could see the lush forest along the way. And as we got to the top, this was at about 6,000 feet, so not too terribly high, but we could see the expanse of forest out ahead of us. And sunrise is just about to come over the mountain ridge there. And of course, with most mountains, you can find cell towers. So there was a cell tower at the top of this mountain. And what was neat about that is there was this little building with security lights on it that apparently had been left on all night. And it attracted a few hundred moths. And these are all moths on the side of the building that had been attracted in by the lights. And it was really amazing to see the diversity of moths. I mean, we kind of got interested in them when we had to tear ourselves away to have breakfast and look at the birds that were around. They were really incredible. But because there were insects drawn in by the lights, there were birds coming in to see the insects. So one of the first birds we had that morning was this beautiful Indigo Flycatcher. This is an old world flycatcher. It's about the size of maybe an eastern bluebird, and it actually looks like the shape of a bluebird. But that was coming in to eat some of the insects that had been drawn in by the lights. There were chestnut-hooded laughing thrushes staying low to the ground and picking off the moths that were in the grasses around the building. And Bornean green magpie was there. And this is an incredible bird. I mean, just look at that color. It's brilliant green, red bill, red legs with a black mask. And this is a corvid. This is a member of the crow family, but a brightly colored one, of course. And the Asian crows seem to have quite good color. And that's an endemic, by the way. There were also smaller birds like the white-throated fantail, aptly named. It's got a white throat, and when it moves around, it flicks that tail wide open. And I'm not sure what that behavior is all about, maybe to keep predators away, but that was also feeding on the moths that were around the lake. And the endemic Bornean tree pie, another corvid, which is kind of unique with that long tail, was also there feeding on the moths. So, oh, and also in the trees above, we had mountain black eyes because there were all sorts of little insects that they were after all around the cell tower. It was really cool kind of environment. So here are some of the moths, and we had breakfast with the moths and the birds. And then we went behind the building into the forest, just a few feet, and they had been putting feed down for some of the birds in the forest, like these red-breasted hill partridges. So there was a nice little group of those that came in. We kind of stood still and watched them, tried not to scare them away, and we ended up with pretty good views of red-breasted hill partridge, really nice views. And as we were looking at them, a crimson-headed partridge walked into the mix. So that was really an amazing bunch of sightings in the bamboo that was behind the building down the trail. So there's our guide Lee taking some pictures of the crimson-headed partridge as it walked across the trail that we had just come down. So as you can tell, the birding was pretty good here. We then, after breakfast, moved down the mountain road and started to notice the diversity of plants along the road. And there were fruit-bearing shrubs like this. There were pitcher plants and lots of ferns and tree ferns and orchids and orchid-like flowers. It was very lush and very beautiful, very tropical as well. And as I was reading through the trip report, I realized that I didn't have a lot of pictures of the birds we saw, but here's the list from the trip report of just this little 1-hour session of birding as we moved down the road, all sorts of species. So when I go back, I'll have to fill in with some pictures of these birds, but it was absolutely incredible. And the birders were quite happy with our finds that first morning. Really, really good birding. So we ended up down at this little fast flowing stream down at the bottom of the hill, or about halfway down the hill, I guess it was. Beautiful place to see birds. And we were particularly interested in this bird, the Bornean forktail, which is, I guess, about 8 inches long. It's a good sized bird and it likes these fast flowing streams. It actually will forage around the edges and sometimes jump into the water and pick insects off the rocks so that it's kind of like a dipper, if you've ever seen the American dipper out west that does the same kind of behavior. So seeing Bornean forktail was a real treat. This is another endemic species. And then by endemic, I mean, you can only find it in Borneo. That's the only place in the world that it's found. By this time, it was lunchtime, and we went down to a roadside cafe, which of course had birds, and the glossy swiftlets were nesting on the building right above where we were eating, so that was fun. And then we started to move to our next destination, and we passed this roadside shack that had a sign that said 4 flowers blooming. So we thought, wow, we better check this out. And so we went down a little road into the forest where this flower was blooming. This is a Rafflesia flower, Rafflesia keithii, which is one of the largest flowers there is. These flowers bloom and they're 3 feet across the blossom. What's interesting about them is they're parasitic and they only will grow on a grapevine. They actually don't produce their own chlorophyll or anything. They parasitize a grapevine and they're quite rare and quite unique. When they bloom, which is only 2 or 3 days that the flowers are actually open, they smell like rotting flesh and attract a fly that will come in and then take pollen to another flower. So they have quite a unique lifestyle, and we happened to drive by when some Rafflesias were in bloom. Down below here is a bud of a Rafflesia. It's on a vine. Can't really see the vines. The vines are actually quite small, but that bud grows for 6 to 9 months before it opens for 3 days, and then it goes over. And this flower here has seen better days. This is about to sort of decay back into the forest. So that was pretty amazing. So one of the highlights of the trip was actually seeing this flowering plant. And you may have noticed before, they put some shelters up around to try and protect the flowers so that people could see them. This area had been heavily cultivated for rubber. It was a rubber plantation, but once they found the Rafflesias there, they decided to cut back on rubber production and protect the plants so that people could see them. So we were really lucky to get in there while the Rafflesias were blooming. That was really a highlight for the first day. And then we ended up over near Mount Kinabalu, which I'll show you on the map again, to this lovely lodge set in a pine forest with these wonderful porches that overlook Mount Kinabalu, which is the highest mountain in Malaysia, a little over 13,000 feet. We were not going to climb up to the top, but we did enjoy the views of it. And the next morning we went up to do some early morning birding on the slopes of Mount Kinabalu. And one of the specialties we were looking for there was this bird, and this is a video, so let's hope it works. This is the Everett's thrush. Kind of looks like our American robin a little bit, at least in shape and maybe a little bit in color. And this bird is very shy, but in the early mornings, it comes out to the edges of the road and forages. And so we got up there early morning and we got excellent views of Everett's thrush. We were really pleased with our find on this one. And so there we were up in the cloud forest, the tropical forest, looking for the specialties that occurred there. And we found them. We did really well up here. We found Whitehead's broadbill, which is one of the specialties. And this is an incredible bird. It's bright green and black, about the size of a cotinga. It makes me think of a cotinga from South America. You can't see the bill, but it's got a broad, flat bill. And it feeds on fruits. And they are around the forest there, and as bright as they are, because they were in a green background, they can be hard to find. But we did get excellent views of Whitehead's broadbill. We also found Whiteheads Trogon, and the male of Whiteheads Trogon is beautiful. It's this red and gray bird. We got good views of the female and fleeting glimpses of the male, but anyway, we did get to see this bird. It's one of the few mountainous trogons, montane trogons, about the size of a blue jay, to give you an idea of how big it is. An insect eater and an all-around just gorgeous bird. And then to complete the Whitehead's trifecta, we found Whitehead spider hunter. And I know these birds look enormous on the screen, but this is a little 7-inch bird, and it's endemic to Borneo. Related to the sunbirds of Africa, you might see the similarity there with the curved bill. And it does indeed feed on nectar, but it likes to stay up high in the trees. So to see Whitehead spider hunter was a real treat. So yes, we got the Whitehead trifecta. John Whitehead was a British explorer and ornithologist who studied in Borneo in the late 1800s, and these 3 birds were named after him. And he wrote this book, The Exploration of Kinabalu, which I saw was for sale at Christie's for about $2,000. So if you have this on your bookshelf, take care of it. It's a good book. One of the first explorations. I think he was the first European to get up to the top of Mount Kinabalu. We got up to the area where people start hiking to the peak, and that's about as far as we got. But the prize there was many different kinds of little mammals, shrews and rodents and things, and this beautiful gray-chinned minivet, which is bright orangey red and black. So that was our treat when we got up to the base for hiking. And then when we got back to our lodge, right in those pine forests behind the lodge buildings was a barred eagle owl. And that was really a treat. This is the least common of the 3 large owls that you can find in Borneo. And it was right outside of our rooms. So we when we found that it was there, we ran and got everybody to make sure that they got a look at this barred eagle owl right behind where we were staying. So here's Kinabalu Park, here's Mount Kinabalu, and then we moved over to Pouring Hot Springs, which is circled here, which is in the lowland rainforest part of Kinabalu Park. And these are definitely hot springs, and they've built these structures around them so that people can use them because they feel that soaking in these hot sulfur springs have healing properties and medicinal values. So we walked through here and into the trails to the forest behind, and that's where we found some more birds. And now here's the black and yellow broadbill, and you can see the bill on this one. It's a broad flat bill. That's how these birds get their name, even though the whiteheads, you couldn't see the bill. But anyway, broadbills are a family of brightly colored birds with big eyes, and they like forested habitats. And this one's about the size of an eastern bluebird. This has a very good name, black and yellow broadbill. But if the bird turns around, it's got a pink front. So very beautiful and very colorful birds. And the broadbills like to sit still most of the time, so they can be hard to find. So to get any broadbill, we were really kind of lucky. Less showy, but highly prized by bird watchers was the eyebrow jungle flycatcher, which we got a view of at Pouring Hot Springs. It was foraging around for insects at about eye level, so we got very good views of it. We also saw crazy things like flying lizards and lanternflies. And lanternflies are insects that stick their mouth part, you can see the mouth part, into a tree and drink the tree sap. And there are about 30 species of these or so in Borneo. And they're called lanternflies, but these particular ones don't emit light. But there were all sorts of interesting things to see, all sorts of very different things to see. We also had some pretty good views of crimson sunbird, and here's a video of one that's sort of stretching and preening and getting ready to take off. When you can find them perched and get them in the scope, I did some videos of these birds through my scope, which is really amazing. And also in Pouring Hot Springs, we had blue-eared barbet. We had a few blue-eared barbets. And this is a woodpecker relative, although it's eating fruits, as you can see, and quite colorful compared to our woodpeckers. This is about the size of a downy woodpecker, but brilliantly colored.
Excuse me, I've lost video. Has anyone else lost video? No, okay, sorry.
No.
Sorry, it might be your connection, perhaps.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
But anyway, this one was sitting out eating fruit, so giving us good views. And then in several areas, we saw the crested serpent eagle, which is one of the raptors here in Sabah. It's about the size of a Cooper's hawk, and it sits around and searches for lizards and snakes and things. And they're quite common in many areas, so we got good views of crested serpent eagle. So from here, we moved across the island, the top of the island, across Sabah, to an area called Sepulch, which has some more really nice forest. And we spent some time exploring the Rainforest Discovery Center there, which is a big place that has been protected since 1996. And it has all sorts of trails and a raised canopy walkway, which was really good. And what was great about that is you could get right up at canopy level and do some birding. So we took advantage of that for sure. And then the trails, you can see this forest, it's just so lush. And there were some nice wide open trails to make birding a little bit easier, although we found ourselves off trail quite a few times when we were chasing some of the specialties. But just a stunning, stunning forest, this Rainforest Discovery Center. And one of the big features that we noticed that many of were these big nests. And this nest is about 3 feet across, and it's the night nest of the orangutan. And there were many, many of them because orangutans can build a new night nest every night. And they take branches and put them together in very strategic ways to hold their strength, because orangutan males are up to 200 pounds. The females are less than that. But they make very sophisticated choices in the way they build these nests. And these nests have been studied extensively, and it takes them sometimes as little as 15 minutes to build their night nest. They're really incredibly smart creatures. So seeing the orangutan nests in the trees got us excited, because this indeed is where we could see orangutans. But first we had to get through some birds. So we had another species of broadbill, the black and red broadbill. Absolutely stunning colors. Again, that scarlet color with the black, and then the blue and yellow beak. And black and red broadbills like to be in pairs. As a matter of fact, a lot of the broadbills move around in pairs, and they live near forest streams, and they'll make a nest on a branch overhanging the stream that just looks like some detritus that got caught on the branch, and that's their nest. And they'll also eat crabs and small fish on the edges of the stream. So really interesting, beautiful birds. These are about the size of a red-bellied woodpecker, so good size broadbill. From the canopy walkway, we saw a couple of banded woodpeckers, and this one was sitting right out in the open for us, which was really nice, posing for us. They again are about the size of a red-bellied woodpecker. They like to eat ants and ant larvae, and they like to excavate their nests in dead palm trees, coconut palm trees. So in the forest on the ground of Sepulch Rainforest Discovery Center, we were looking for some specialties, including the black-crowned pitta. Now, pittas are a family of birds, and they're one of the reasons why bird watchers come to Borneo. There's several species you can see here. They live on the ground, and they're very shy, so hard to see, even though they're brightly colored. And to get this one to come out in the open for a picture like this is pretty amazing. But they're described as rainbow-colored, short-tailed ground thrushes. And we spent quite a lot of time looking for these on the forest floor, and it did end up with pretty good views. We also found this little tiny woodpecker called a Rufus Piculate, which is a woodpecker, one of the smallest woodpeckers, but it doesn't have that stiff tail that woodpeckers do. Instead, it has quite strong legs, and it likes to be in thicket areas and gleaning insects from tree branches and things like that. So we got a good views of Rufus Piculates. And then the kingfishers. And there are 12 species of kingfisher in Borneo. And some of them are forest kingfishers, so they're not really along rivers necessarily. And this one is the blue-eared kingfisher, which likes to be in thickets and low to the ground. We did get Bornean banded kingfisher in Sepulch, and this is tiny. This is about the size of I guess a bluebird, something like that. And the thing about these kingfishers is they are sit and wait predators. So they sit very still on the branches and then go get what they're going to catch and come back. So it's hard to find them by movement. So you really have to scan into the vegetation. But this is the endemic Bornean banded kingfisher, and we did get good views of this. And then we found the smallest kingfisher, the Oriental dwarf kingfisher. And this is about the size of a hummingbird. This thing is tiny. I know the pictures make these birds look big, but this is a small bird, likes to sit, perch low and sally out and catch insects. And our fantastic local guide picked it out and gave us very good views of Oriental dwarf kingfisher. And then we also had the Rufus collared kingfisher. And this bird is called the ghost bird because it is so shy. But this particular individual wasn't shy at all. I have a video, and it just sat there and moved its tail a little, sat out in the open for us. It was incredible, the views of this. This is through my scope. This is a digivideo. Turned his head a little bit. And he sat there for so long. I guess we were far enough away that we really didn't bother him. But he sat there for so long that we ended up trying to take our picture. This was our group picture. And he was somewhere back here. He was a little too small for the picture, but it didn't mind that, just sat there for a long time and allowed us to take our group picture and get amazing views. So that's the Rufus collared kingfisher, or also called chestnut collared kingfisher. There were some primates in the forest. This is the pig-tailed macaque, a species of monkey with a little tiny tail, which you can see sort of sticking out the bottom there. And they liked the canopy walkway. They were moving all around there and eating the fruits and things in the forest. And we had really amazing views of this creature called a colugo, which maybe looks like a lemur, but it's not a lemur at all. It's actually a primate relative. And it is like a flying squirrel, but about 16 inches long. It's a big animal. It has skin between the front and back legs, so that allows it to glide, and it can glide upwards of 200 feet between trees. And this particular one had just landed on the side of a tree, and we had to get an angle on it because you can see how well they blend into the background. To get a picture, we had to really kind of move and get a side view. And then at dusk, up on the canopy walkway, the red giant flying squirrel show started. And from the walkway, you could see these animals flying through the sky. Incredible. This animal it's a big squirrel, it's a giant squirrel, about 1.5 feet plus the tail. And they have that patagial membrane between their front and back legs and between their back legs and the tail. And that allows them to fly from tree to tree. So we got the treat of watching that activity just as it started to get dark. But I guess the biggest thrill for me was seeing an orangutan in this forest. And this is a female orangutan that was just above us. This picture, I think, is again through my scope. It was holding a baby, and we can tell that because there's this little leg hanging out the back, but it wasn't showing the baby. But we did get to see the orangutan. That was on my birthday, so that was my birthday present last year. And in 2019, which is when we went on this trip, there was a mass flowering in Borneo, which led to the production of many, many of these fruits, this dipterocarp fruit, which means fruit with 2 wings. And the wings are what help the fruit disperse, and the seed is what a lot of things eat, especially orangutans. So it was a big food source by the time we got there in August for orangutans, and they were really having a good reproductive year. We actually saw lots of females with babies, and I was able to manage a video of the orangutan eating one of these fruits. And the baby's clinging to her, but it's in the back, so hard to see. But it was just a thrill to see this animal in the wild. So not far from the Rainforest Discovery Center was the Sepulch Rehabilitation Center for orangutans. And it was a place where young orangutans are brought and raised and released back out into the wild. But other than the nursery of the babies, the adult orangutans just roam the grounds here. And when we first saw this road, there was a big male orangutan just roaming down the road. That was such a thrill to see that. The males have these big facial flanges, which maybe are for dominance or some reason that they're fatty tissue that sort of make the face look really wide. And these guys can weigh up to 200 pounds. They have an arm span of 6.5 feet. So they are quite arboreal. In fact, they're the most arboreal of the great apes. This was a female that we saw, and she's holding a baby there, carrying that through the forest, and they climb through the forest carrying their young. It's only the females that carry the young, looking for food, looking for fruits. And they do have some feeding stations in the forest here, and we watched the baby come out and be seen, and all the time the other arm was holding on to the to the mother. So that was really a thrill to see the baby orangutans. There's 8 years between when they have one baby to the next one. And the babies are dependent on their mothers for 2 years and then really weaned away from the mothers at 4 years. So they have a long childhood and they are critically endangered. So it was really a thrill to see the orangutans doing so well here in Sepulch. Okay, so then from Sepulch, we moved south to the Kinabatangan area, stopping at the Gomantong Cave on our way down. And this is a world famous place, a world famous cave. And what's great about it is the surrounding forest is protected for the cave. So we saw more orangutans there and also bush pigs on our walk into the cave. And the cave is massive. The cave system is massive. It's limestone caves. And it is a place where there are maybe 1 million bats roosting during the day, and also a few important species of birds. So the bats, I think it was hard to get pictures because it was dark, but I believe these are all bats roosting. And as you can imagine, that led to a lot of bat guano or droppings. And the smell was quite interesting. But the birds that were nesting in there were quite important. This is the black-nest swiftlet. They had finished nesting by the time we were there, but some of the nests were still on the wall. And the mossy nest swiftlet also nests in there. And this particular one, the edible nest swiftlet. And as the name implies, people eat these nests. These nests are made by the bird using their saliva. And then they are collected and used to make bird nest soup. So they're solidified saliva, and they're one of the most expensive animal products that humans consume. And nests can fetch up to $3,000 a pound. So the way that they do this is when the birds come back after the winter and start to nest, they make their first nest, which is collected. And then the birds make a second nest, and that is left so the birds can raise their young. So they are kind of protecting these birds so that they can get the nests. It wouldn't make sense to collect all the nests, so they do leave them. And the bird's nest soup is a gelatinous soup, which is said to slow aging, boost sex drive, prevent lung disease, and improve complexion. I haven't tried it, but if you go into your local Asian food store, I bet you can find bird's nest to make your soup. So you can Google a recipe and try it out for the holidays. This is apparently what it looks like. And there's the cave, and you can see maybe in some of my other pictures, some of these structures, and these are the guys up at the top collecting the nests. It's really a precarious thing. This is a better picture of the ladders that they have suspended. And this is a little rest hut where they stay. I hope they don't sleep there because it really smells bad. And there are about 20 million cockroaches too. But it's an interesting place to visit on our way to the Kinabatangan River. And the Kinabatangan River is the second longest river in Malaysia, about 350 miles long. And it's an incredible habitat for a lot of bird species and mammal species as well. And so we took a boat up the river to our lodge, the Borneo Nature Lodge, which we liked because of their emphasis on green policies and practices. They really did a good job there to minimize impact. And then we would explore the river by boat a few times a day, and sometimes even at night we went out. And of course, there we are looking at the Oriental pied hornbills, not in the city this time, but in the forest. So we got pretty good views of them. And hornbills, to me, are akin to toucans of South America because they have those big bills, which they use to feed on fruit. And then they have the casque on the top, and the casques are different in different hornbill species. And the function of the casque is debated, but they think that it does help to amplify the sound of the males calling in the forest because it's such an expansive place that they need to find each other. So it's sort of a built-in amplifier for the birds. This is the white-crowned hornbill. There were 8 species of hornbill possible on this trip, and we saw them all. And this is probably the rarest of them, the white-crowned hornbill. And hornbills have an interesting breeding biology. They are cavity nesters, and this bird is 2.5 to 3 feet long. So it needs a big tree cavity to get in there, and the female gets in there, and depending on the species, she'll lay 2 to 8 eggs. And then the male and female, she gets sealed into the nest hole for the next 2 to 3 months, depending on the species, to incubate the eggs. And this is a protective measure to protect her on the nest and protect the eggs. And then the male goes around the forest and brings back food for her. So if you want to be a female hornbill, be prepared to be locked up in a nest hole for a month or 2 while you're incubating your eggs. And then the male continues to bring food in until the babies are about to fledge. And it's just really incredible reproductive system that they have. This is the wrinkled hornbill. It eats fruits, and if it can find lizards and other frogs and things. And you can see the casque is a little bit different on this one. And then this is the national bird of Malaysia. This is the rhinoceros hornbill, which has this big, beautiful bill, which is yellow and orange. And it looks, I guess, like a little bit like a rhinoceros horn. This is the biggest of the hornbills. It's about 3 feet long. And so we did get to see those fairly well and saw them in flight as well. So the hornbills were really a highlight of this trip. And we got to see them really well while we were cruising on the river, because they would fly over the open areas. Now, as we cruise, we would just scan all the trees, and you can see up here a bird sitting. So we got a little closer to find that it was a bat hawk, and bat hawks eat bats, and it's fairly close to the bat cave, and the bats come out in the evening and hunt over the river. So it's a good spot for this bird. Apparently eats the bats whole, and it also eats swallows and things like that. So we got to get bat hawk on our list, and also white-bellied woodpecker. And this is the same genus as pileated woodpecker and about the same size. This is the female with half of a red head, male with a red head, but a good-sized woodpecker to see from the boat, really. And our boat driver was fantastic, getting us in good position to see these birds. There were some macaques, some monkeys in the forest here too. Excuse me. And this is the long-tailed macaque, as you can tell by its aptly named, that very long prehensile tail. And they would move around the forest along the edge of the river in troops, jumping, sort of flying across from branch to branch. So that was pretty amazing. And then we would go and explore up the tributaries of the river, and we would see these structures strung across, obviously made by humans, but what on earth are they? And they're actually bridges for the monkeys to cross. And we did witness some of the long-tailed macaques crossing the monkey bridges that were put up for them so that they could get across the river tributaries safely. Because there were these saltwater crocodiles in the rivers, in the tributaries. So you don't want to be swimming across and run into one of those. So that was pretty amazing. Another target of our trip was the Proboscis monkey, and we saw many Proboscis monkeys. This is a male, and it's called Proboscis monkey because of that big nose that it has. And again, the function of that is debated, but apparently the bigger the nose, the louder their sound. So I guess it helps with dominance and keeping the troop together. So that's the male Proboscis monkey. And then this is a female and a young male. His proboscis is not quite as big, but we got good views of proboscis monkeys as well. And then some smaller, different monkeys. This is the silver langur or silver leaf monkey, which had quite a shaggy coat. And we thought, wow, that's a hot coat for this hot tropical climate. It has a multi-chambered stomach because it eats leaves and that helps it digest the cellulose. And so we did get some good views of the silver leaf monkey. And of course, there were birds. The scarlet-rumped trogons were perched just alongside the river, giving us glorious views. And storm stork was a target which we saw well. And they are quite rare and endangered. There's maybe 500 of these birds left. The Kinabatangan River is their last stronghold. But the great thing about storm storks is they like to sit out up in the open and survey the area. So we got very good views of storm storks when we were birding from the river. And hooded pitta, can you imagine looking for a shy forest bird from a boat? And indeed we found them and got good views of hooded pitta. Again, our local guide was fabulous. He heard them and maneuvered the boat with the boatman to get good views of hooded pitta. And then back at the dock, at the lodge, at night, there were buffy fish owls that were fishing in the river. So we got a chance to see those. We did a night cruise, which turned out to be a rainy night, but we did get to see leopard cat on our night cruise, which was an amazing find because this is about the size of a house cat. And leopard cats actually have webbed feet, so they do hang around rivers. They're quite adaptable. And so we were able to see this both in this area and also in the Danum Valley. Now I put this picture in to show you the habitat along the edge, and you can see this is native forest here all along the edge, but just behind is palm oil plantation. And there's a closer look at that. Palm oils are monoculture plantations, and they're grown to produce these little tiny palms, which are made into oil, a type of vegetable oil. And the problem is that they're cutting down the native forest to plant palm oils, and it's a major threat to orangutan populations. And it's been massively expanded in the past couple of decades. So we did see, as we were traveling around Borneo, places where the native forest had been cut so that palm oil plantations could be put in. And palm oil is in a lot of things, a lot of foods that we know that are on our supermarket shelves. I've had to give up Nutella and Kit Kat bars because they have palm oil in them, and I don't want to be part and parcel to this. Shampoos and conditioners on supermarket shelves contain palm oils or derivatives, many of them do. So I just became aware of this problem, and the problem is when they're cutting down the native forests, up to 5,000 orangutans are killed because of these palm oil concessions each year. So it's a big problem, and I've tried to learn what I can about it and cut down on the palm oil products that I buy, and even contact some of the companies that have palm oil in their products. And I found an app called Palm Smart that you can take to the grocery store and scan the barcode on what you're looking to buy and find out if it contains palm oil or what the palm oil policy is of the manufacturer. So it's just something that I became aware of on this trip and have been trying to learn more about and spread the word about. So the last part of Borneo, of Sabah, that we visited was down here, the world-renowned Danum Valley. And we went to a wonderful lodge called Borneo Rainforest Lodge in the Danum Valley. It was quite luxurious, quite a wonderful place, and in a great forest, a great protected forest that offered lots of birds for us to see. We birded along the roads and in the forest trails, but we didn't really have to go far for some of the wildlife. The red langur monkeys were just all around the lodge, so easy to see. I think this is the very first thing we saw, the first walk we took. Walking around were Bornean crested firebacks, which is a type of pheasant. And because these birds are protected here, they weren't very shy. So we got good views of family groups of Bornean crested fireback. And of course, it seemed like every other branch had a whiskered tree swift on it. And these are cute little swifts that are insect eaters, and they like to perch upright and then go out in search of insects. So we got great views of them. And then some of the forest birds that we were looking for, things like striped wren babbler, which likes to stay near the ground. So we were looking low for this. And of course there were pittas, and we spent a lot of time looking for the endemic blue-headed pitta, which was a forest floor dweller. It goes around and turns leaves over looking for worms and things, and makes a sound, territorial sound, very faint, but Lee, our guide, knew the sound, and we were able to track the blue-headed pitta down. One of our participants, Trina, found the Bornean bristlehead, which was also a target here. This is an endemic species found only here in Borneo. It's a monotypic species. It's in a family all by itself because they really don't know what to do with this bird. It's kind of like half a crow with a crazy yellow and orange and red head and that shrike beak. And they tend to hang around in groups. So we did see some groups of Bornean bristleheads, but really wild bird and the only place that you can see them. And then more babblers, chestnut-backed scimitar babbler, low in the vegetation. The bristleheads tend to be up high in the trees, so we really had to scrutinize. We visited the lek of a great argus, which is another species of pheasant, which has these amazing long tail plumes. And so we went into the lek to see the males. We didn't see them displaying, but you can look on the web and find videos of these birds displaying, but just incredible feathering on these creatures. And then up in the trees along the road, the red-bearded bee eater, and this one catching a bee, but beautiful bee eater with that orange throat, pink on top of the head and green. So the colors of some of these birds are just incredible. Back deep in the forest, we tracked down Bornean banded pitta, which let us see it, which was a real victory for us. And we had to leave this one behind. The blue banded pitta we could hear, but we couldn't track it down. We spent a lot of time on this bird. So we left this one to go back for next time. We did some night drives and night walks and found crazy things like Bly's frogmouth, which is a little frogmouth. I think this was on a roadside stop. We used these quiet golf carts to do our night drives here, and it was really cool. And we found some more colugos, and these were canoodling colugos, I think. A little bit surprised to see us, so we didn't spend too much time on them, but it was really neat to see them again. And then this Emmons tree rat, which wasn't even known to be here, but this one on one of our night walks just came right up in the vegetation and looked at us. So now there's a mad rush to try and trap this animal and confirm that it lives in this rainforest. So that was pretty cool. And the large frogmouth we got to see, not very well known. This is an insect eater, kind of looks like a little bit like an owl, but it's not. A big wide mouth, which it uses to catch insects. So we really had a wonderful time, and we had a great group of people, great guides, a great driver, and the boatmen were really awesome as well. And I love this picture because you can see this boat on the other side, really jealous of the amount of fun that we were having. We really did enjoy this trip. So there are results that you can see if you're interested on our website. There's a trip report posted, sunrisebirding.com/19 Borneo web. You can find it pretty easily. We were in Borneo for 10 days. We had 263 species of birds, 41 of them, those species endemics, unique to Borneo, 32 mammals and 16 endemic mammals. So the trip report is there with more pictures and videos. And we are going back. We're going back next August. Just a fantastic trip. If you're interested, you can get in touch with me or look on our website. Same itinerary. It's just a wonderful place. And I just want to thank all the people that were involved in this trip. A lot of the pictures were mine or Steve Bird's. Lee was our guide, Edwin was our driver, and Wendy, Trina, Sandy, and Guy were traveling with us, and it was just a great group to travel with. And thank you for being here and listening to me tonight, and accompanying me to Borneo. I hope you get a chance to go there at some point. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Gina.
You're welcome.
And if you have any questions for Gina, you can unmute yourself and ask it. Michelle.
You have to unmute yourself, Michelle. You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Okay. Gina, how do you identify all these birds? Did you study them up ahead of time? Or did your local people know them all?
Yeah, I usually make a slideshow for myself of the birds that we're expecting. And then, you know, the local guides have the local knowledge, so they know where to look, and they certainly know the calls better than we do. So it's a combination of both things. And if you've ever been on a trip with Steve, he is a natural birding guide. He can learn things like that. Takes me a little longer, but he's really, really good at it.
So one more question. How many guides were there and how many people? It looked like about 4 to 6 participants or were there?
Yeah, we had 4 participants, and Steve and I and the local guide. And then in some of the areas, we had a local guide there as well. So Wendy actually was there on this trip, so she can tell you more about the experience.
Yeah, the guides were really great. The food was great. They took wonderful care of us, and they were hysterical too. They were really good spirits.
Yeah, it's fun trip. Other questions?
Did it feel safe traveling in Sabah?
Absolutely. Completely safe, wouldn't you say, Wendy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was never a concern.
No, as a matter of fact, we ate some meals in towns, which were pretty bustling towns, and never felt any uneasiness at all. It was great.
People were very sweet to us.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So Tina, interested to see there are Trogons and Pittas there as well. So at some point they must have, you know, it was part of the old Gondwana land, I guess. Everything was joined up.
It's interesting, you know, like even the hornbills, I know that they must be related to toucans. They have this, or at least they've evolved, what is it called? Convergent evolution.
Right.
They've evolved the same apparatus to feed with. And it was interesting to see, and bee eaters too are there, but the bee eaters look a little different from the African and European bee eaters. So it is quite interesting to see that. Yeah. Yeah. Really, it's another world. It's beautiful and so interesting.
Yeah, how warm is it? Is it basically equatorial, right? So was it hot and humid?
It was pretty hot and humid. Up in the mountains was a little bit cooler, but it could be damp as well. But down in the lowlands was quite hot and humid. Yeah. Yeah.
Was this the dry season? I presume as opposed to rainy season, right?
It was the dry season, but that's relative in the tropics,
Right.
you know.
Right, yeah.
So.
How many of the birds were life birds for you, Gina, and for you, Wendy?
Okay, so life birds for me, what did I tell you? We had 263. Probably, well, I've been to Thailand and I've been to other parts of Asia. I would say, though, I probably got about 200 lifers.
Wow.
Yeah. What would you say, Wendy?
Well, this was my first trip to Southeast Asia, so virtually everything.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Did you take pictures as well, Wendy?
You know what? I'm very fortunate that I have a daughter who's a fabulous photographer. So when I can coerce her to come along on a trip, then she takes all the photos.
She's a really good birder, too.
Gina takes wonderful
Oh, she
pictures. I don't
does.
know how she gets her photos. She's just fabulous.
Thank you. Steve takes a lot of good ones, too.
Beautiful, beautiful pictures, Gina. Just
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you. So, well, thank you all for being here. I hope you stay healthy and enjoy the holidays, and we can all get out in the coming months and get back to traveling. Can't wait to do that. But
I got the app, Gina.
Thanks, Gina.
Thank-
A week from tomorrow, we have a program on Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge in New York State.
Okay.
And then in January, Amy Hopkins is going to talk to us about the parrots of Australia.
Whoa.
So I hope you'll join us for those.
Looking forward to that.
And any last thoughts, anybody?
Thank you for
Thank you,
putting all
Gina.
these programs together, Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. You do an amazing job. I
Thank
get
you.
the benefit of seeing and
Thanks.
presenting.
And everybody stay safe
Yeah.
until next week. See you then.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Gina.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Great to see you. Thanks
Thanks,
for
Gina.
signing.
Bye, Gina.